So, good morning wanderers, or whenever this video is going up. My name is Brendan and welcome back to Bullet Wanderer. And the title of today's video is something along the lines of Royal Enfield Bullet 500, my first puncture. And I will say up front, unfortunately I don't have videos of the actual incident in question, but it's just a picture or two. And if you were wondering what that weird bit at the start was of me leaving my phone by the side of the road, stick around to the end and I'll tell you why. So last Sunday I had my first puncture on this bike, and as you know, up until then it served me relatively well all the while. So what happened? The truth is I don't know, but I do know how it happened. Well, not how it happened, but what the story is that entailed. So, Sunday morning I was at home in Chamor and I thought I'd go off to Hook Lighthouse, which is the world's second longest and oldest running lighthouse in the world. And I did that, and that was great. And I even checked the tyre pressures when I was there and everything seemed fine. And I had lunch and then I was headed back to Kilkenny to go have a look at an antiques shop. And on the way, randomly passing me on a random road, because it wouldn't be the main road from Waterford to Kilkenny or from Glendalough to Waterford, my dad happened to be coming the other way on his GS, which you might see in this video, which was a group ride into the Cummers. And so I waved to him and he waved back, and you know, I thought that was funny. I'll text him about that once I stop and say that was a weird coincidence, wasn't it? So I continued on my merry way, and I was coming around these twisty bits of road up by Inistee, and I thought, the steering feels a bit funky, but I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just gravel on the road or something making it feel a bit squibbly. This is where I should have learned the lesson, but it's not, to stop and have a look at what was going on. So I continued on, and in my mirror I recognised the silhouette, the light silhouette of the GS, because it has those two side ones and the two central ones are kind of offset, so it's recognisable. So it's my dad and he's coming around just to have a chat. So we drive on for a few minutes until I can find a spot to pull into. And I find a spot on the side of the road somewhere out in Inistee, that general area, and it's a change in the level from the road to gravel. Now this town has always confused me. It's called Dungarvan, but I know Dungarvan is in Waterford, so what is this? There's also a Mayo in Kilkenny, and I know that Mayo is nowhere near Kilkenny. Anyways, that's a side thought. I pull in, and the level from the main road to this little side part is about an inch in difference, so the bike goes up in the air for a second and it comes down, and it gives me a, you know, a lot more extreme than that, but not that extreme, enough to make me go, that was funny again, but not actually check it. And then my dad pulls in beside me to have a chat, and then he looks down and is like, Benny, that tyre is all flat. And I look down and the tyre is all flat, as he has said. So I think I prepared for this, or so I thought. I have a spare tube in the saddlebag with me at all times, just in case this sort of thing happened, and can repair it at the side of the road in theory. So I get out all my tools and things, and my dad takes the wheel off. Again, me being a backseat engineer, instructing him based on what it says in the manual, and the wheel comes off fine. But that's when I notice the dreaded word tubeless on the tyre, and this is where things grind to a halt. So the tyres that are on this are Avon Road Rider tubeless tyres, And I think all the bullets of this one's era, 2014, 2016, all came with these tyres fitted. And apparently the rule is you can fit a tubeless tyre over a tubed wheel, but you can't put a tubed wheel over a tubeless wheel. So it's a great struggle to get the tubeless tyre off. And as we're doing it, a man on a bicycle comes over, and he's this old English gentleman. He says, I've got some tools back up at my house if you want me to go and get them. And he says, give me 10 minutes. And he goes off, and he does come back in 10 minutes. Of course, the wheel hasn't budged off of the tyre hasn't budged off of the thing. So himself and my dad get the tyre off of the wheel eventually. And that's great. And then it presents the new challenge of getting the new tube tyre in the tyre and back on the rim. And this became a big sword in the stone sort of moment. Who could remove Excalibur from the stone? Who could put the tyre back onto the rim? And the man was with us for a good half hour, and before we just said thanks so much, but you know, I don't think it's going to change much from here. And then shortly after, another man arrives in his van, and he has a stab at it for a bit, and you know, we kind of come to terms with that this wheel tyre is not going back on by human hands. So he starts ringing his friends, trying to see anyone he knows would have the machinery to put it back on, or at least a van to take it somewhere safe. And the man was very kindly offered he had a yard up the road a little bit, that if it turned out we couldn't get the bike back to tomorrow, he said we'd be more than welcome to leave it in there overnight and figure it out. In the meantime, I'm ringing up what I thought was the number of my insurance to try and get breakdown assistance. But in my calm panic, I couldn't find the right number, even though it was staring me in the face the whole time. But you know, these things happen. Oh, here we are in Thomastown. I ring my uncle who has a van, but alas, it would be too small for the bike. But while I'm ringing my uncle, my dad gets through to one of his friends, Martin, who is a bike mechanic for racing bikes, I believe. And Martin happens to be coming down from Carlow to Tremor, and he said he would stop by and save us. And that's great. So we thank the other man with the van very much for his help, but we were sorted, and he says, you know, here's my numbers, if it turns out you can't, you can use the yard. So that was sound, and he goes on his merry way. And then as we're waiting on Martin, another van comes over pulls in on this bit of the side road, and you know, tried to stop by to see if he could help, and we said no, we have a van on the way. And he said, oh well, if you need a lift anytime, I have a van too, and I'll give you my number. And that's what he did. So it's nice to meet all these people that'll help you out in a bind. And here is the fun kicker. Plenty of people stopped on the side of the road to see if we needed a hand and to try and put the wheel back on. But the only people who didn't stop were, ironically, motorcyclists. They all sadly went by. The comrades in arms gave up on us. And maybe it was the thing that they saw. There's two bikes there, so maybe they thought we had it well in hand. But for me at least, because I'm a saint, if I ever do see someone that stopped at the side of the road on a bike, even though I might not be able to do much, I do stop by and ask, do you need a hand, you know? And sometimes I can give them the air compressor that I have in this. I say sometimes, but that happened once. Or maybe they have someone that's on the way. But you know, it's nice to stop by and see that someone needs help for the comradeship of it all. But anyways, Martin comes along on his van, and we put the wheel back on, but not the tyre, and it makes this awful grinding sound as we roll it 3 or 4 feet onto the ramp onto his van, and it gets inside. Everything is good. The bike is in the hands of someone who can repair it, and he says, I'll have it for you tomorrow morning. but he's very sound. This bridge is always a lot tighter of a turn than I think, so I always go right down slow. Anyways, the final piece of the story is that after all this, we had tried to get the second tube into the tyre, back onto the tyre, but after all the poking and trying to stuff it in and back on the wheel, no soap mind you or anything like that to help ease it along, it turned out that the new tube was punctured anyways from all that. So even if we had gotten it back on, it would have been a Pyrrhic victory, because immediately back to square one, having to take the whole thing off. I think that would have put a much sour end on the day than the one that actually happened, which was he took the bike away and I, still in my bike gear, got a lift back on the GS to Kilkenny, sitting pillion. Long story short though, lesson learned, and I was incredibly lucky for such an unlucky event to transpire that I did just happen to be passing my dad going the other way, and he did just happen to pull up to chat, and that I pulled in when I did, because if I kept going on, you know, the next tight turn could have been my last, to be dramatic about it. So that's my first puncture story. Oh, as you can see, I've gotten the bullet back and everything is good, but that's my first puncture story. Now, what's yours, or have you not had it happen yet? I still am going to carry a spare tube around with me, so at least if I can get it to a shop, I'm not going to have to wait for the hope that they have the spare tube. They can just put it right back on for me, you know. For now though, I'm off to Kells to get a coffee, because that's what I like to do on Wednesdays. Oh yeah, that little bit at the start. So what I was doing there was just recording the audio of the bike zipping by, because for my film Long Way Around I was recording Foley. Now what is Foley? Foley is just sound effects for films. Oftentimes it's considered an art form in itself. If you think of things like using coconut shells to make the sound of horses clip-clopping, it's that sort of thing. Of course, having the bike, I don't have to imitate the sound, but it's nice to get the specific sound of a drive-by that I wanted. So thanks for watching. Sorry this video got a bit rambly there. I hope you'll like and subscribe, and tell me your puncture story in the comments below. And also, if you manage to get a tubeless tyre back onto a tubed one, I'll tip my hat to you. Bye!